In order to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Nantucket Civic League, the Civic League decided to make a movie. And we just decided to, they decided rather, to get a committee going. And the committee is composed of Nancy Soderberg, Bill Hance, and I, Eileen McGrath, in case you don't know who I am. We are amazed as we did the work to see how much has been accomplished in 100 years of the Civic League. And we certainly hope that you will enjoy this movie, which puts across just how much we have done.
First, let me give a little background about the Nantucket Civic League. It was formed when several residents got together in the summer of 1903 to talk about some of the problems they saw on the island. The organization's founder that summer was a Mr. William Rounds, a distinguished man who had a summer cottage at the Hallovers in the 1890s, but later spent the winters in town. He had quite a life. As a lad of 17, he entered Harvard Medical College, but the Civil War intervened and he left for service with a Massachusetts regiment. It would make a great story to be able to tell you he fought in some of the historic battles, but it appeared that he never left the state. He served at Fort Sewell in Marblehead until the regiment was disbanded. After the war, he did not return to medicine, but entered journalism and became the editor of the Boston Globe. He then entered the field of diplomacy when he became a United States Commissioner to Vienna, where he had many personal contacts with King Edward VII of England, ex-Empress Eugenie, Garibaldi, and the King and Queen of Italy. During that first summer, he and a small committee developed what we would call today a mission statement, and that was to promote the prosperity of Nantucket Island and the welfare of its visitors. On January 14, 1904, he and his committee called a meeting at the Athenaeum to formalize the organization. Between 60 and 70 people attended, despite the effects of a terrible winter. Although our founder was proposed as the first president, he declined, but accepted a position as vice president. Dr. J.S. Gruard was elected president and piloted the organization through its formative years, including its formal incorporation on July 31, 1905. He served for 9 years as president and another 13 years as vice president. The first problem they took on was the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, which operated the steamship to the island. They had many complaints about the terminals, erratic service, and poor mail transportation, and threatened to form their own steamboat company if service did not improve. Service did improve, at least for a while. Also on the first list of problems to solve was adequate fire protection, care of the poor, a better water supply, public parks, and improved postal service. Many of the same problems that we continue to wrestle with today. On February 5, 1904, the League's first president, Dr. Gruard, wrote a letter to the general manager of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. I'd like to quote a few sentences. I am authorized by the Nantucket Civic League, made up of the most influential men and women and the largest property owners on this island, to inquire of you what will be the attitude of your company towards a new steamboat company to be operated between Hyannis and this town, or possibly from New Bedford. The unanimous feeling here is that we have been badly used by the existing steamboat company. Dr. Gruard went on to state that they had sufficient capital commitments from islanders to establish a new line, but, quote, we of course would be glad to enter upon such arrangements with the old line as would render such a course unnecessary. taking cognizant of the old line associations and remembering the fact that under previous management there has been less cause for complaint." End quote. They also like to receive letters, and one of the first letters they received was from a John C. Gardner, who was a counselor at law and maintained an 11-room office suite on Nassau Street in New York City. His letter in 1904 said, "Dear Sir, please enclosed find my check for $1 for annual dues to the Nantucket Civic League. Please enroll me as a member. I am a non-resident Nantucketer and have sufficient interest in the welfare of the island to think that such an organization as this is not only useful, but its necessity to Nantucket imperative. It is not in a captious or complaining spirit that I write, but from a conviction that Nantucket is not pushing ahead the way its many blessings should warrant, and the causes come from within. Nantucket takes itself too seriously. It should abandon self-laudation and look to its faults. In his isolation and necessarily narrow view, the resident sees only in the stranger the larger part of his yearly living, and is not too nice in his means of obtaining that living. He has all of his life soaked in insular self-complacency and steeped in the theory that to be of Nantucket birth is a peculiar patent of nobility. He will absorb only flattery and resents wholesale criticism. All this enters into his being until he tolerates the stranger for his usefulness, but treats him with more than indifference. The hotels are poor and expensive. The cost of drugs, fish, meat, vegetables, groceries, etc. is very much higher than on the mainland. It is almost impossible to get a servant except from abroad, and it is quite difficult to get a carpenter, mason, or laborer in the summer. The prices are high and the work indifferent. The non-resident property owner is unfortunate. He is absent 9 or 10 months out of the year. He has no means of correcting these evils except a futile protest in summer. Annual town meetings are held in midwinter, and behind a rampart of ice, irresponsible people with not a dollar's worth of property vote away his money while he is utterly without representation. The resident needs to see Nantucket with the eyes of those who come from abroad to feed him. You may use this letter as you wish." And that was written more than 100 years ago.
I'm Bill Hance, past president of the Civic League, and the Civic League has been celebrating its 100th anniversary, which has just now come to a completion. I am going to start on the history. I should explain that the Civic League is the umbrella organization over the area associations on the island. They have varied in number, but have been increasing in the last decade or two, and we now have 22 area associations scattered more or less all over the island. I want to begin kind of towards the end of the 100 years, at least 2/3 along, when Bob Metters, the Reverend Bob Metters, in association with some good friends, Hugh Chase, Harold Taylor, and others, felt that the Civic League had been getting a bit moribund. So they basically got together and resuscitated it. And they reorganized it in such a way that it became what it is now, the umbrella organization over these area associations on the island. So they deserve a great deal of credit, and the successive presidents thereafter have been building on their influence and their good startup, and we've been going from good to better. I should mention that Harold Taylor played a significant role in setting up the organization of the town laws and bylaws. They had never been codified before. That was a massive job, and they did it in a couple of years, and that has been followed ever since. By now the town clerk is responsible for maintaining it.
Over the ensuing years, the Civic League has been the driving force in the establishment of several organizations and donations that have benefited the island. The Civic League donated 90-plus acres of land to the Boy Scout Council to establish a campsite, donated the land for Mill Hill Park, helped formate the Conservation Foundation, the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Tree Fund, the Heath Management Plan, the Family Counseling Service, the Conservation Committee, and the Airport Commission. The Civic League initiated and completed assigning numbers to all properties and rationalized street names. Up until this time, 26% of the street names on Nantucket were duplicates.
So pretty soon, since I'm a geographer, the suggestion was that I should take on the job of renaming the streets, or naming the streets that hadn't been named, numbering the houses. And the idea was that nobody knew how to find people out in the boonies. You lived in Matticat or off Matticat Road, and the fire department and the emergency vehicles were supposed to know where everybody lived. Well, as the population of the island burgeoned, that became less and less a possibility. So the project was called an emergency locator system. But after some study, it became apparent that the only way to go was the normal way of naming streets and numbering houses. When I began the effort, I soon found out that I needed to do the in-town, which was the only part, that and part of Sconset that had numbers previously. But the lady doctor who had numbered the houses in town considered that no house would ever be built that wasn't up already. So she left no numbers for the empty lots. And all the streets leading south of Main Street, for example, you would walk down those and you'd find the numbers going up, and then they'd go down, then they'd go up again. You'd have the same number 2 or 3 blocks apart. Well, that's not a very effective emergency locator system. So I had to actually go back to the middle of town and renumber. As a reward, if you can call it that, they made me president, and I was president for 3 years. Now, Bob Metters, to go back to him for a minute, he had been president for a long, long time. And I said to myself, I am not going to do this longer than 3 years, because it'll be very difficult to get somebody to take over if they think you're going to go on forever. So I stuck to that, and I was succeeded by a whole row of excellent leaders.
Our members serve on many town committees and organizations and boards: the Finance Committee, the Conservation Committee, the Planning Board, the Beach Management Committee, Parks and Rec. Each year, the Civic League conducts a Meet the Candidates Night. All candidates for public office are invited to present their credentials and platforms and answer questions from a selected panel and from the audience. This is a most important service that the Civic League performs. The Civic League studies and comments publicly on town warrant articles before every town meeting is held. At present, the Civic League is doing an in-depth study of the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan and Draft Environmental Impact Report. This document has critically important implications for our island, its neighborhood, and its citizens. It is important to develop a course of action that will be in the best interest of all Nantucketers.
We owe a great deal to extremely loyal members who come all the time and have been active in a great variety of ways. The leader of this little study, Eileen McGrath, is one of them. Ginger Hurd is another. Joan Craig, who served as the president of the Town Association for quite a few years, is another one. And Nancy, I'll bet you could cook up some other.
Oh, Jane Lamb.
Yeah, oh, yes,
She's been
Jane.
a pillar of the organization.
Yeah.
Betty Glendinning, for years and years, devoted time as president. We really have a loyal group of people.
Yeah.
And we should mention Lot Sargent.
Lot Sargent, oh
who
goodness.
Who is a summer person who never failed to just so enthusiastically back everything the Civic League did, and he led the President's Breakfast
For a good many years
plan.
until this year.
Yeah, until this year.
When
Now he's
moved away, unfortunately.
moved away. It was a great loss, but we'll keep in touch.
So, you want to wind up?
Well, I'll just wind up by saying I am so proud of the Nantucket Civic League, and I've been active in it for many years and have been, as I said, a past president. And we will continue, I know, to work hard to make the Nantucket Island that we all love a lovely place, a decent place, and one with integrity.
Thank you.
Thank you.